Hello, Herman. How are you today?
I'm well. I'm well. How are you doing?
Very good. Yes, excellent. Actually, I'm very happy to have you on my show. It's always a pleasure actually to have interesting developers and especially, I believe, solo engineers like you. So, Herman, would you like to introduce yourself in a few minutes?
Sure. I think the whole self-introduction is always a bit of a tough one. I was speaking at a conference a while back, and they asked me to write a little bio for myself, and I'm like, what do I write over here? So I just copied what was at the top of my blog, which is it's uh, a hiker of mountains, maker of things, uh, person on the internet. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, I'm the creator and maintainer of the Bear blogging platform. I live in Cape Town, South Africa. Now, if it weren't cloudy outside that window right now, you'd see Table Mountain. So I've got a nice backdrop. Every now and then I'm on a call and people are like, "Is that a virtual
Mm.
background?" And actually, no, it's just really beautiful down here. um, and yeah, I started out as a video game developer, but found my way into web, and I've been running Bear since 2020. It was a lockdown project that got away from me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, first of all, yeah, indeed, it looks like it's very rainy for you. Um, the first question actually, do you have in mind? It's of course related to our job as an engineer. Like you work and you are from South Africa, Cape Town, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. How is it to be a software engineer in South Africa and Cape Town in your case?
It's actually pretty good. So the reason being is that we have a pretty good tech community over here, and there's generally a lot of meetups. If you are into, you know, your large languages, your Pythons and your JavaScripts, there'll be multiple meetups per week that you can go and attend. If it's something a little bit more niche, like if you're into Elixir, or if you are one of the indie hackers, there's generally one or two meetups per month that you could go and attend. There's also, and I think this is fairly unique, I haven't seen this in other parts of the world, is that while the tech community is present here in South Africa, it is still relatively small. And so if you go to a couple of the meetups or you're on the ZA Tech Slack channel, you tend to bump into the same people again and again and form those friendships. I'd say that one of the big plus sides for South Africa as a engineer is that it has a fairly affordable cost of living, and because we are also in the European time zone and we're also first language English speakers over here, a lot of people tend to work for European companies from South Africa. So earn in pounds or euros and then have your cost of living be in South African rand. And that's a fairly nice arbitrage to have.
Yeah, I've never been to South Africa. It's definitely in my bucket list, but I know the culture in tech companies are quite similar in all over the globe, but you always find differences. So yeah, that's an interesting one. However, I believe at the moment you are working only by yourself, isn't it? Like you, yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's actually a bit of a funny story. I used to, as I mentioned, I originally started out as a video game developer, and then I joined a tech startup that was Airbnb, but for boats. So if you have like a boat that you want to rent out, or you want to rent a boat, you can rent it via this platform. It was called Get My Boat, and that was a great place to work. I worked there for just under 3 years. Um, then at one point, a good friend of mine who had recently moved to Grenoble he got in contact with me and he said like, "Hey Herman, do you want to go and ride the Trans-Siberian Rail, go from St. Petersburg down through Mongolia, China, and then back up into Russia, take 3 months to go and do that." And I thought that would be such a spectacular thing to go and do. So I ended up quitting my job to go and do that. And then COVID happened and I never managed to make that trip. And then after the pandemic, there's the Russia invaded Ukraine, and so going and traveling in Russia was kind of off the books. But during the pandemic, I actually set up two projects that have done fairly well. The first one was actually a 3D modeling tool for artists called Just Sketch Me, and it actually ended up replacing my salary within a few months. So I was at least financially independent. And then I started working on BearBlog, and that took a while to take off. But now it is the project that I am predominantly focused on, and is also my main source of income, which is quite nice.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. So now you are like an indie developer, indie hacker, kind of.
Yes. And to go back to your original question over there is I very briefly had a person working for me on Just Sketch Me, and he was a spectacular employee. He did a bunch of the customer support, and he ran the social media and Reddit pages for Just Sketch Me, because there were questions and all that coming through. And when he left, I did miss him, but I also realized that like I don't really want to be a manager. I don't really want to be a boss. Instead, I just want to play around with the projects that I'm working on, write code, and if this leads to, less quote unquote growth, then that's okay. Because I actually just value my time and my energy going into the things that I enjoy doing, rather than, trying to maximize revenue.
Yeah, but it is true actually, as an engineer, we like freedom as well, but it's quite hard. Like I've done a bunch of projects myself as well, and it's hard also, even though we enjoy the product we built and we use it for ourselves, it's hard to work on the other side, which is acquisition, user acquisition, marketing. It can be quite tricky. I wonder, in your case, do you target mostly like your local area, South Africa, or you target mostly the US market, Europe,
So in
probably?
both Just Sketch Me and BearBlog's case, it's a fairly global audience. However,
Mhm.
there's definitely an outsized amount of revenue coming from the United States. And that's not because most of the people are in the United States that use it. It's fairly well distributed throughout the globe. It's just that I think Americans tend to have more access to money to spend, and they're more comfortable with spending money on online subscriptions. So while I'll have, the same number of people in, let's say, Indonesia and the United States, the majority of revenue will come from the United States. And I think that kind of tracks. So for Bear and Just Sketch Me, I have purchasing power parity set up. So if you are Indonesian, you have lower purchasing power than someone in the United States, and therefore the cost of the subscription is relative to your purchasing power. But even with that in place, people from the US are significantly more likely to have excess capital to spend on subscriptions, and that makes perfect sense. In both cases, it's also a freemium model where you get most of the functionality out of the box, and it's only if you want to do something special like connect a custom domain, or in just Sketchme's case, to use some of the more unique models, different body types, then you can pay me between $3 and $5 per month.
Mm. And you said like, yeah, developing countries, I mean like countries like Indonesia, you like with the location, the IP address, like they can pay a discounted
Yeah,
price.
absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that like the system that I set up to do purchasing power parity, it's fairly easy to spoof with VPN, but I
Mm.
haven't found anyone really engaging in that. I think people are, you know, they they're not trying to maximize $1 here or there. And so I've just left it as a very simple, check IP address, location, country, and then break it down into the 4 different tiers of purchasing power and serve a different price based on that.
And yeah, I think like the best is not to advertise this, and so no one will really know, and that way, like you would just
So that's actually the thing, is that like people do mention fairly regularly on their blogs that there is purchasing power parity. So it
mm,
is a well-known thing, and yet people don't really try and exploit it. I think I'm also in a fairly unique space over here. Specifically with Bear, is that there's a pretty strong social cohesion within the community, and there's also um, people who are really looking to have the platform flourish, and so they don't really want to pay less. In some cases, I've had people request to like be able to pay more above and beyond the subscription. Um, but in those cases, I sort of just say like, yeah, no, just enjoy yourself, write, tell your friends. That's all I really want.
yeah, supporting the platform. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
important. So yeah, for like the marketing finally, especially I believe for BearBlog, it really went organically. You- Like,
Yeah, so the Bear was a very lucky one in how people found out about it. So I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that like most projects don't really survive, and 1 in 10 VC-backed companies actually make good money. Um, Now, I've started many small projects, and only 2 of them have ever like generated an income. That would be Bear and Just Sketch Me, and I'm very grateful for that. And in Bear's case, what actually happened, it was quite a surprise. Is I built Bear for myself, as these stories tend to go, because I'd tried fiddling around with all the different static site generators, and I wasn't super happy with them. And I also wanted to be able to post from my phone. So I couldn't really operate Git from my phone. And so then I played around with WordPress, and I played around with a couple of other blogging platforms, but all of them were trying to do too much, because they were trying to target individual bloggers, but they were also trying to target organizations, and they were trying to, target people trying to build websites for their company and stuff like that. And I thought, like, what I really want is I want a blogging platform that specifically is targeted at personal bloggers who are just trying to put some words up on the internet in a very easy way. And uh, I want it to be very simple to use, but also to have a lot of depth if you don't mind getting your hands dirty. So a good example of this is if you want to style your page with a lot of other platforms, you can select this element, and you can select the color, and then you can select the font, and da, da, da. I did away with all of that. Instead, you can write text posts. You can add images and stuff in Markdown. But if you want to style it, the theme CSS is available to you, right? There's no like stylistic editor. You can't select the heading and change the font. Instead, you have to go and you have to get your hands dirty with CSS. And I think it's that simplicity in the interface that allows people to just get up and running with their blog really quickly and very fast. But then also, if they really want to, get into the nuts and bolts, so they can. And in this way, you see a lot of extensions for Bear come out of the community. I think I saw one this morning where one of the bloggers, Robert Birming, had created a nice media uploader. So you can just upload images inline while you're writing in your blog post. So I make like JavaScript and stuff available in the dashboard so people can extend their blogs, their editors as they see fit as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's very, very simple. And then like what you said, to extend, you can add custom CSS, custom code, and then you can have something a little bit unique. Like,
Yeah, and I think that the main, I don't do marketing for Bear, but because Bear blogs have at the bottom of them, powered by Bear, it tends to create this feedback effect. The more blogs there are, the more people know about Bear, the more blogs there are, and it's a nice self-perpetuating little system.
and in my case, I learned about BearBlog thanks to that, actually, thanks to the footer of one website. And then I
Perfect.
thought, oh, wow.
Then it's working.
And that's how I learned about BearBlog. And you're right. It's like day after day, I mean, more people are using BearBlog. Of course, more people will know about it. That's quite a nice growth hack. I mean, it's similar to like how to look Hotmail. Sorry, Hotmail started also. When people used to send emails, the more people used to send emails, they had like the footer with sent by Hotmail, or like the same with the Apple Mail. That's very very interesting. So now it's like I think you really started to. I mean, BearBlog really started to be known thanks to one of the posts you did on Hacker News. Is that
Yes.
right? Like,
So I did a post early on. I'd say it was like not even a week after I'd released the first version of Bear. I did a post on Hacker News saying like, here's my little blogging platform, and I put up some speed stats because I was saying like it's the fastest blogging platform around. And the only reason it was fast is because it was serving pages that were like 2.5 kilobytes, right? Whereas, WordPress, or depending on what you have installed over there or what themes you're using, can be up in the several megabytes range. And it somehow found its way to the top of Hacker News almost immediately, and it stayed up there for about 20 hours. And during that time, so many people signed up to it, and naturally a whole bunch of bugs surfaced, as happens when a whole bunch of people stress test a platform. And at the time, when you create a blog on Bear, it gives you a subdomain. So in your case, it might be pierre.bearblog.dev. And at the time, I didn't have a wildcard record set up because the hosting provider that I was using at the time didn't support that. Instead, I was using Cloudflare to issue a new subdomain, a new CNAME for a subdomain each time someone registered a blog. And immediately, while it was on the top of Hacker News, I actually exceeded the number of records that I could have on Cloudflare. I think it was like 1,000 or 1,500 records, and they were all just like maxed out. And so I'm there at like 2 o'clock in the morning over my laptop, just trying to get that sorted out. And I ended up going and creating a better certificate system that allowed for subdomains, all with proper SSL security, and so it got sorted out. But like at the time, I'm like, I'm certainly not. It wasn't even in my mind that I was going to get 1,000 people signing up to the platform, and then it happened in one night.
yeah, that's crazy. And was it a new account on Hacker News, or were you What was your
It was
profile
a
like?
fairly new account. I've been a Hacker News lurker for a while, and I think I'd posted a blog post or two of my own previously, but it was a probably a freshish account.
Mm. Yeah, that's probably the title was like so unique, and having a blog platform
Yeah.
with like no JavaScript and
I think it came at
tiny.
the right time because at the time there was a lot of talk on Hacker News about like why are we doing all this stuff with front end frameworks? Why are we overcomplicating our lives? Model view controller has worked for the last 30 years and it will continue working in the future for content based sites. So like if you're making a blog, why are why do you even have a build pack? um, why not just have everything be server side rendered? And I think it was also coming off the tail of me working on some systems that I was working on them and they were overly complicated. And I was also thinking during that entire time, like, this would be so much simpler if we just did server side rendering instead of at the time we were doing React Redux, Redux for data parsing. And we had to jump through some serious hoops to get it to pre-hydrate a bunch of the content so that it would be optimized for search engines. Now, that's a solved problem with Next.js and a whole bunch of those kinds of frameworks. But at the time, you had to really fiddle around to get to make sure that when like a crawler came along and requested your page, it had a bunch of content pre-hydrated into it to index instead of hydrating it after the initial page load. And I'm like, this is too complicated. Model view controller, this is the way it's supposed to be. And so based on that philosophy, I went and I started Bear with like no JavaScript no JavaScript at all. Now that's changed slightly in the past couple of years. It's still predominantly no JavaScript on the front end, but there are a few things that it was kind of unavoidable for. One of them being like asynchronous image uploads or the upvote button on a post is you don't really want that to be a synchronous request, right? You like click upvote and then the page reloads. You don't really want that.
Yeah.
But by and large, it's still server side rendered with a little bit of vanilla JavaScript sprinkled in here and there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think like I read you are doing a lot of CSS tweak to avoid having too much JavaScript, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, that was fun. So it was based on this idea that if you hover over an element with CSS, you can technically trigger an endpoint by having an image load, right? So you have a single pixel image tracker, and then when you hover over the body, what happens is it requests that pixel for some arbitrary thing like a border image, but then you make the border image transparent and it's fine. And so what this does is it allows you to create an analytics tracking pixel that is generally not blocked by ad blockers because they don't pick up that this is happening because it's such an obscure way of doing it. I'm sure that's changed now after I wrote that post. But the second part is that it didn't log bots at all because, at least at the time, bots did not interact with the page and they didn't render CSS. And so while some bots used JavaScript, they would never really trigger the body hover event, and in so doing, it eliminated a whole bunch of false hits.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that's how you could have the stats of your blog without having JavaScript, actually. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, that's really smart. And you spoke about like how simplicity it's important for you also to maintain less less time for you. It's also easier, of course. I would just, before to jump back to BearBlog, your other project is just Sketch. And I believe that's a project you also built first for yourself because you said you were a game designer, developer before. So probably you need a lot of, like you need to draw some sketch. Is it true or?
So I was a game developer at the time, and while I wasn't actually doing any illustration for work, we had illustrators at our studio who were significantly better than me at illustration. I took an interest in illustration myself. I've always been someone who sketches. I mean, like in primary school, I was drawing Dragon Ball Z characters and Pokemon and all of that. And I also take part in game jams. So when this is kind of like a hackathon where you make a game over a weekend based around a certain theme. And so I would do my own illustrations for that. And at the time I was practicing, I was like really into drawing. So I was practicing every day. I would go to like live drawing classes. I'd do a couple of like YouTube tutorials to try and get my illustration better. And my friend Simon, who was working with me at the time, we were just chatting one day about how those wooden mannequins that artists use could easily be digitized, and you could just have like a web app that has the wooden mannequin. So we put something together as a proof of concept and added a couple of little realistic models, and then I published it on the internet and promptly forgot about it. I put a little donate via PayPal button on it, and then I forgot about it. And like 6, 8, 9 months later, I received a donation of $40 and like a note like, "Hey, thank you for the tool." I'm like, "Oh, people are using this." So I went and I looked at the analytics, and like people were using it. You know, a couple hundred people per day were using it.
Mm,
And so at the time, it was built in the Unity game engine, but exported for the WebGL,
oh yeah.
and uh, it wasn't very performant, and it had to load every time you wanted to use it. So I rebuilt the entire thing using 3JS. Which is, you know, web first, runs incredibly well, very good documentation, and then carried on improving it over the next couple of years. And the number of people who used Just Sketch Me went from a couple hundred to a couple thousand. I'm not too sure where we're at right now, but it's used quite a lot, and that's really nice to see. Here's also the secret thing, is that uh, I'm still, for Just Sketch Me, I'm still on, it's hosted using Cloudflare Pages. It's still on the free tier.
Oh wow. Oh yeah.
It's
Oh,
like,
that's
I think it's serving, 10 terabytes per month, and Cloudflare's like, it's cool, fam.
and yeah, so like the traffic went also organically, and I believe before it was completely free. Someone donated, so you thought, oh, actually, people are interested in my side project, and it went from there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. What I think you'll get a kick out of this. So the first feature that I made, the first paid feature that I made, was the ability to store poses in the cloud. You know, you could, let's say, for instance, you have like a really good pose of someone running, and you wanted to store it for another time, you could save that pose. But uh, I didn't feel like provisioning a database and setting all of that up, and I just wanted to do sort of like a proof of concept. So I I actually had the save it to a Google Sheet. I had like an API wrapper around a Google Sheet, and when someone saved, it would save it to the Google Sheet, and when they loaded it, it would load it from the Google Sheet. Now, as you can imagine, this didn't scale very well. Once it got past like 200, 200 saved poses, it started to get really slow, and at one point it was like at 4 seconds to load a pose. I'm like, okay, it's time for me to go and actually create a proper database. So I moved over to Firebase, as the database. I think at the time, this is a while ago now. It wasn't the Firebase database that it's currently used. It was called like the Firebase real-time database, which has been deprecated. Um, and I used that for a while, but ran into limitations with that as well, and ended up standing up my own server with Django running on it. And now everything just runs via a Django application for storing scenes, poses, media, and now there's also like so many features on Just Sketch Me now that require a backend, whereas in the early days it was just the front end, and then later like front end and a Google Sheet.
Right. Yeah. Before, I really love that. Like, you always start from like a very minimum proof of concept, an MVP, and then after, if people like it, and if you need to move due to limit, like Google spreadsheet was not enough, then you move to Firebase, and then you had to move to Django API and probably Postgres database, and yeah, and so on.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Is that I think that the I used to mentor startups in Accra in Ghana for a few months, and one of the things that I just saw time and time again was this premature optimization. Is they'd have a product with no customers, but they were like spending so much time trying to ensure that it would be performant if it hits, millions of users. And I'm like, listen, you just need to plan for your first 10 users. Once you've got your first 10 users, you can plan for your next 100 users and then your next 1,000, because you don't need everything to be incredibly performant right now. I will say, however, that if I were to go and do this whole thing again, I would start off with Django in the beginning, because Django is fairly easy to stand up. It's batteries included. The Postgres integration is really good. The ORM, I'm a fan. Not everyone is a fan of Django's ORM, but I am a fan. And it can scale very well. I mean, Bear is actually just one Django monolith. But currently it's running on, 5 or 6 servers in parallel, and can auto scale upwards and downwards. Whereas in the early days, it was just, one $7 a month droplet.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's the difference. Are you still using Heroku or Fly IO?
Yeah.
Or are you?
So I'm still using Heroku, but I do have an instance set up on Fly. The reason that I've got an instance set up on Fly with a database following along is that in the past couple of months, I've started trusting Heroku less. They put out a notice saying that they were, if you read between the lines, it sounds like they're stopping development of Heroku and they're just going into maintenance mode. And so I just want to have redundancy in case they decide to shut down the service. I can just flip over to Fly with no problems. But at one point, I was bumping up against the performance limitations of Heroku. And then, as with these things, is I spent a couple of weeks working on some very robust caching strategies. So now most of the content is actually cached with Cloudflare at the edge, so it's really fast. And in so doing, I reduced the strain on the Heroku system by about like 90%. And now there's no real reason for me to upgrade away from Heroku. And I think it's also like one of those things where I could spend, the next couple of weeks just migrating everything off of Heroku properly. But everything's running so well right now that I don't really want to shake the boat.
Makes sense. And yeah, I do agree. Like, it's a good hack, I would say, to use Cloudflare to cache a lot, because they do have a lot of really nice and handy settings there, where when you manage it well, I think some of the caching options, you have to pay for it, but it's very cheap. And yeah, it can be very efficient. So that way you would pay less for your provider, your hosting provider.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct. And I think I say that my host is Heroku, but Cloudflare serves so much more actual stuff than than Heroku.
Mhm.
So the functionality hangs out on Heroku, but the actual blog, well, the blogs are all served from Cloudflare.
I see. And yeah, what I really love about especially BearBlog, how simple it is. And I have, like I haven't seen any other blog platform as simple as BearBlog. Probably, the one like Hugo on GitHub pages. But like you said, you have to commit your Markdown files. It's annoying. It's more for developers. But BearBlog is like extremely simple. You know where to start, and yeah, and that's it. And you just have to write, and it does what it's supposed to do. That's all. I was wondering, like, now you said you are pretty much working as a solo engineer full time on the two projects. Are you like, do you have a roadmap specific on your day to day? Or I know where I will start. Today will be a marketing day or a coding day or a just sketch day or a BearBlog day, or you just follow the flow?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I actually just arrived back from a month away in Japan. Um, and so if you look around my room right now, it's like I've got, stuff that's still being unpacked.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
there's Cape Town, and
oh
then
nice.
still doing laundry. Uh, but during the time that I was away in Japan, I was just really doing maintenance. I was answering support emails, fixing any bugs that needed my attention, and doing moderation because there is a discovery feed on Bear that, you just want to make sure that everyone's playing nice over there. Um, Now that I'm back and working properly again, I do have a couple of things that I am focusing on Bear that have been sort of piling up in my backlog while I was away. None of these are major changes. I think that with Bear, there is what makes Bear beautiful, and one of the things that really attracts people to the platform is, as you said, how simple it is. And so I have to regularly stop myself from adding to the platform, because by cramming too many features and too many new things into the platform, it'll actually take away from the fundamental essence of what makes Bear a great place to write. And so while there are a couple of quality of life things that I am working on, there's no major features that I've planned in the foreseeable future. With just Sketch Me, I actually haven't really touched that code base for a while. I'm predominantly doing support. Now, where I spend a lot of my time at the moment is I'm trying to do a couple of things on Bear specifically. The first one is that I want to ensure the longevity of the platform. And this is a tough thing because I kind of have to think about my own morbidity. It's like if I died, how could the platform go on without me? And that just means making sure that I have two developers who are familiar with the systems and would be able to step in and take my place. And also just making sure that I make correct choices around the tools that I use and the services that I use to not paint myself into a corner in the future. The second one is that Bear has very miraculously turned into a bit of a community. So you have people. This activity tends to happen on the discovery feed on Bear, where it's people sharing slices of life, just photo journals of their travels, and then sometimes they'll email each other or they'll write posts to each other, and it's actually become a really lovely place to be. And a lot of people have found a lot of value in being in that space. And I've just been trying to nurture that. So I sort of see myself as a groundskeeper where I just make sure that like the garden is clean, that there's no trash anywhere, and that it's a very comfortable place for people to come and stay and spend some time. I think that the internet at large has a lot of negativity and has a lot of sort of bad vibes at the moment, and I'm trying to curate a space that people can interact with each other and have a good time and sort of like take a step away from the broader nastier internet at large. And it's been good. It's been nice to have such a dynamic kind of working environment. So like one day I'll be working on let's say for instance yesterday I was working on speeding up code blocks because code blocks would make an external round trip request for another file and like speeded it up by 100 milliseconds. And while that doesn't make a material difference, I felt pretty good about it. And then the next day I'll be chatting with a couple of bloggers who have a couple of suggestions for the platform. While I was in Japan, I met up with two bloggers on Bear and just had like tea in a park with one of them, and then the other one we went out for dinner. We had okonomiyaki, which is like a Japanese pancake. And so my role is evolving over time, and I'm enjoying it.
That's amazing. And it's really good to have a strong philosophy and vision for BearBlog. I would say it really helps. You know where you have to focus, where you need to pay attention. It's so easy to always add features and instead of be focused on why people go to my platform. And I believe this is really why BearBlog is so unique. Because I haven't seen like anything like that. Like everybody tries to be like everybody else and be extremely simple and radical in that way where that's the philosophy and it's there to last. I'm not going to like BearBlog is not going to be sold or whatsoever. It's just there to stay and yeah, to be there for a long, long time. I feel like that's probably why people are using Bear,
Yeah,
why we are using it.
for sure. Is having a good philosophy is nice because I can always look at my philosophy and say, is what I'm doing right now in line with that, or is it detracting from that? And so one of the things I've gotten very good at over the past few years is actually saying no. Is when someone says like, hey, I would like to have this sort of feature, or I'd like X, Y, and Z, I can say like, hey, I like this is unfortunately not going to be added to the platform. What is also nice about Bear, and this is actually part of the philosophy statement, the Bear Manifesto, is that there are there are many ways that you can build stuff for the platform that will not be integrated into the platform directly. So, for example, if you want to integrate Blue Sky comments into your blog, you can do that. And there are people sharing like little tutorials on how to do that. But I'm not going to go and build a commenting system into Bear specifically saying like, here is Bear comments, you know, this is the way that you do it. Because everyone kind of wants to do it a little bit differently. And once I open that door, it's hard to shut it again. You know, then people want to use a different system for comments and they ask me, can you integrate this as well? I made this mistake once early on with the platform. Is I added a way to add a specific analytics provider, and then it was pretty hard to roll back that idea. I think a lot of one of the reasons why I'm so intentional about what I do add is that I'm also aware of how difficult it is to take back something that I've added. So it's like everything that I add makes it a little bit more complex. And so I have to be very careful to not add too much stuff, lest I create a more complicated system than I'm comfortable maintaining.
It makes sense, actually, completely sense. And I believe that's why you publicly publish the BearBlog manifesto.
Yeah,
How
it
did you have the idea of having a a manifesto? And when did you publish it for the first time?
So I actually, the idea had been kicking around for a while because I was regularly fielding emails from people who had had to leave platforms that they were previously a part of. So the big ones were there was a platform called Co-host, which shut down, I think, 2 years ago. Then there was also the WordPress drama with
Mm,
Matt Mullenweg, I think
yeah,
his name is, where
correct.
a whole bunch of people were leaving WordPress because they didn't like what was happening over there. Then there was another platform that shut down recently as well that had been operating since the early 2000s. And so people had to like upend their entire blog that they'd been writing on for the last decade and port it over to another platform. And so I had multiple people send me an email saying like, hey, like before I move over to Bear, are you going to sell the platform? What's your plan over here? Are you looking to flip it? Because I don't want to commit to using this if you're just going to leave us stranded like the rest of them did. And it was during that time that I had a really hard to think about what it is I want to do with this. I've always known that I wanted to keep it running as like a good open spot on the internet, but actually sitting down and formalizing my thoughts around this was very helpful to me, um, because I could now have that as sort of like my mountain, and then putting it out there in the public so that people understood what it is that I'm working towards and working on.
I see. And like, are users able to export they post if they want to? Or that's like to they are.
Yeah, absolutely. They can export their posts as a CSV file. They can export them as Markdown files. I make it very easy to leave platform if you want. I have a bit of a nuanced philosophy over here as well. Is that I I don't really believe in a customer loyalty. I feel like every organization or service, they should always be judged on the current merit. And so I'm going to try and provide a spectacular place to host a blog on the internet. And if that ever changes, I want people to complain and I want them to leave platform. And I want to like feel the ramifications of the mistakes that I've made, right? I feel like more companies need to be held responsible for the decisions they make. What I see fairly often is that a a person will have an account with some company. The company will do something that people are not happy with, but then people won't necessarily leave the platform. They'll just complain about it on Twitter. And it's like companies don't really feel being complained at on Twitter. They feel, you know, uh, a higher churn rate. And so it's part of like what also is keeping me accountable is that it's incredibly easy to cancel your subscription. It's incredibly easy to export your blog information and posts. And my job is to ensure that you don't want to do that.
I see. And that's why you give a door if they want to leave, and then your responsibility is to actually keep them. And if they are leaving, you see directly, oh, maybe there's something going on there if there are too many. Because Bear, I really love the idea where you love it or it's not for you. So I believe all of the active users are really, they love the philosophy behind it. And
Yeah,
you
they do.
don't tourist basically on your platform. And if they, yeah, and that's why they have like the tools where they are the ownership and they know they can also export all of their data.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really that's so interesting. Like I was very also I was very curious if how you use like, do you use any AI tools? Of course, like BearBlog doesn't have any AI features, if I'm not mistaken, but for you on your day-to-day basis, are you using Cloud Code, Codex, anything else, or?
So I'm fairly fortunate that I really enjoy writing code, right? And I feel like I have spent a good amount of time with the new AI coding models. I've played around with Claude Code, I've played around with Codex, and they're incredible. And it also kind of, in some ways, makes me a bit sad because I feel like it's kind of being taken away from me now. With Bear specifically, I write the code myself. I because I've written all of the code for Bear myself, I'm super familiar with the code base, and so changes are very easy for me to make. Now, I do, however, use AI for one specific purpose, is that I regularly run a full security audit against the code base. As you're well aware, the number of exploits that have been found has gone through the roof since the agentic era of software engineering has come out, and I have to stay on top of that. Now, I'm relatively certain that I've covered all my bases, but we've sort of seen, especially with Claude Mythos, or what could be happening with Claude Mythos, since it's not available to the public,
Mm.
that there are these multi-step exploits that it has been finding that I I'm not good enough of a security expert to figure out if there's a multi-step exploit in my code base. Um, so actually just running these security audits is a uh, uh, good thing for my mentality. I can sleep a little bit better at night. And every now and then it catches something. It hasn't caught anything that's a major security vulnerability yet, but it might point out something like, if this is a very unlikely thing to happen, but if you're logged in and this blog does this, then maybe they could do a cross-site scripting attack on this. But so it's nice to just have oversight over there. The second thing that I do have is that on the discovery feed, I have had a couple of scares where some really bad content has surfaced. The
Mm.
internet, unfortunately, is not um, always very nice. So I woke up one morning to multiple emails about a large data leak of a Hungarian political party. It was sharing all of their names and addresses and contact details, and it looked as if this was a political party that was in opposition to um, or didn't like the what was happening in Russia, and it looked like it may have been a state-sponsored leak, and they were leaking it on multiple platforms. And BearBlog happened to be one of the platforms they were publishing that information on. And so I had to go and shut that down really quickly. And as soon as I shut down one blog, another one popped up with the same information. And I shut that one down. And so then I put in some filters to try and catch it. But now what I have is I have a little AI model that when a new blog is started, it just checks to make sure that the initial things that are published aren't bad. Or
Mm.
it flags them if they are. So if there's like a data leak of, um, you know, personal information being published, or if there's something even worse, like if there's, God forbid, like child pornography, it will immediately sort of shut that thing down and then flag it for me to review personally, and then I can make a judgment call on that. So for an automated moderation, it's been pretty good. However, you can't really extend that to full moderation. So I do manual moderation myself inside of the discovery feed, and then I have a contractor who's currently doing like an hour a day in the evenings when I'm not on, to just make sure that like people are being nice. Every now and then like people are like really shitty to each other, and it's like, no, none of that. Let's like hide that post over there.
Yeah, yeah, that's always like the tricky part when you are a hosting platform where anyone can publish text and photos. It's yeah, you need moderation, and yeah, locally you
Yep.
can have like an agent doing that for you, an AI agent. I like your idea of, these days like all engineers are using only AI mostly and are all AI first. But now, especially in terms of like BearBlog, where you want to keep it so simple, you are just one prompt away of a new feature. You want to have an API for BearBlog. Just, it's so easy. You want a native app for BearBlog? It's so easy. And it's so tempting with AI to add any features you would like or your community would like. But then the problem, it's not simple anymore. So when you force yourself to code yourself, and especially if you like it, it's like, I love cooking. Why I would have a robot cooking for me? It's the same. You want to replace what you don't like moderation. Probably you don't like it too much, so you want to outsource that. But for the coding, if you code yourself, you enjoy it, but also it forces you to think twice before to implement something because it will require more time.
You're absolutely right. One of the draws of those tools is that code has become cheap, right? And so now it's less of a question of can I build this, and more of a question of is this really necessary? There's a game that was published back in the day that I use as inspiration a lot, Eco, which is by the same developers that did Shadow of the Colossus. And in this, they had a fairly complex game system, levels and armor and weapons and all of that. And they ended up stripping bits and bits of it away. They called it design by subtraction, where they removed all the features that made it too complicated, and because they wanted to focus on the story, and they wanted to focus on like the main gameplay loop. And they found that like by having levels and by having different weapons and everything, they were actually detracting away from what made the game fun. And they sort of distilled it down to its core. And in the game, you don't even have like proper weapons. You just have a stick, and you don't even die. Like you lose if your traveling companion gets stolen away from you. And it's through this process of elimination that they created a very enjoyable game. And there's another quote somewhere where it's like, perfection is not when you've added everything, but when nothing can be removed, or you've removed everything you can. Something along the lines of that is like, that's kind of what I'm going for over here. Is I like single-use tools. I find that tools that try to do too much tend to bog you down, and just trying to do one thing and one thing really well is enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And it's easy to make it like as a factory to do everything. And then it's where you get lost actually. And then you tend to attract like your users are everybody, and you are not a
Yeah.
strong community anymore. I believe when you are targeting exactly one need, the people who love writing in a super simple platform because it's just about writing, they don't need fancy features. At least they can focus on the words, and that's it.
Yeah, you're right. And so there's actually to expand on that point a little bit. I not regularly, but every now and then I receive an email from someone who is using Bear for their business, right? So they've got like their business website set up on Bear, and they'll ask me something like, "Is there a way to add multiple users to the account?" And I'm like, this isn't. I understand what you're doing, and you're free to use Bear for that. However, you are using a personal blogging platform outside of what it's made for. And so I'm not going to be building multiple user accounts over there. If you are at the point where where this system isn't exactly what you need, I recommend, moving over to Ghost or all the other website builders that are catering to your need. But Bear specifically is catering towards a person who is writing for themselves.
And I really admire that from you because you need a lot of discipline. Usually they would say, oh, we are ready to pay like a enterprise more money to you for this specific feature. We are ready to pay money if you build that feature for us. And you have to say no. And I believe like it's extremely hard. And I see also product owners and in companies also they usually say yes. And then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's, you just squeeze,
I've actually
you,
started enjoying it. In the beginning it was very hard for me, but now like
mm,
I kind of enjoy it when someone's like, "Hey, you know, I'm using Bear outside of the regular use case. Can you build this feature?" And I'm like, you know what? I don't actually think this is for you. Like, I'm really happy to have you on platform. Don't misunderstand, but these are the constraints that you operate within over here, and this is what works really well for the people who are using the platform for its intended purpose. So if you can fit inside those constraints, good on you. But otherwise, like there are there are platforms that will satisfy this need that aren't Bear.
yeah, it's like you would see those kind of features requests where you would build the feature if you have enough vote. But again, then do you decide? I mean, you let the community decide in, but sometimes it will lead you somewhere where you don't want to go. So yeah,
Yeah.
um,
I used to
yeah,
have one of those feature request trackers that you're describing. I think it was called Nult,
mm,
where people could suggest features and then other people could vote on those features and da, da, da. And I'm like, no. No, 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 none of that. So instead, I think there's also a nice thing is that like I like there to be a little bit of friction when it comes to requesting features. So I like it when people email me. I like to receive an email from someone with a well thought out justification of why this would be a good addition to the platform, instead of like making it really easy for them to just go and toss a feature at me. Sometimes it would be like very, very low value feature requests, and every now and then you'd get one that's just like, "Hey, make this feature that is paid free." I'm like,
mm,
you probably wouldn't email me about that.
yeah, yeah, correct. I mean, now you have the plugins, which is I've seen like this is quite recent. So that's a good
Sort of
one.
is that they've been possible for a while, but I've just kind of formalized or it's not formalized. I've just created a bunch that people can copy and paste without them having to go and build them themselves. So there is now a Bear plugins GitHub repository that anyone can go and use, but technically people can go and build them themselves, either coding them themselves or using ChatGPT to create a plugin for them. And having that is also really nice, because a lot of the times when someone sends me a feature request, I can just send them a plugin and be like, "Hey, you can actually do this, and I've already made a little plugin for you over there."
By just injecting the JavaScript
Exactly.
code. And it doesn't give too much like security issues there.
No, it's all just client-side JavaScript, and
Mm.
it all runs either on the front end of their blog or in their specific dashboard. So there's no like cross-contamination, cross-site scripting problems involved over there.
And my question, one I have here, the discoveries feature, was it someone who asked you to have like a way for anyone to discover new blogs, or was it from you?
It was from me.
Oh,
I thought what would be really nice is so on the homepage you'll see there's the view example blog, and that goes to my blog just so people can sort of see what it looks like. But I saw people doing very interesting things with their blogs, and they were writing interesting posts, and I'm like, I want to put something on the homepage that people can explore more than just my blog. They can go and like look through what other people are writing. And at the time, I was very interested in ranking algorithms. I find that ranking algorithms are a fascinating conjunction of human psychology, algorithms, and just like trying to prevent exploitation. And I know that I'm very familiar with the Hacker News algorithm, and Reddit also has a pretty good algorithm for their trending feed. And so I actually created my own algorithm for Bear that was based on this upvote system. However, there's a few constraints that I had over there. Is that I wanted this algorithm to run entirely as a SQL query. And then the second one is that initially I had upvotes on the discovery feed, but I removed them, and now the upvote button is at the bottom of the post. And the reason for this is that I didn't want people just upvoting things based on the title. I wanted people to go to the post and then scroll to the bottom of the post in order to upvote something. So at least you have a higher chance that that upvote is from someone who went and at the very least skimmed through the article, right? What's also quite nice is that if you see on the discovery feed, the algorithm is published at the bottom. So there's the number of upvotes that you have, and then there's a gravity that kind of pulls it down with more exponential pressure over time. And so something that gets a high amount of upvotes in a short amount of time will go to the top of the feed, and then it will get pulled down stronger and stronger as time goes on. I've also had to add a couple of extra features around there that prevent, let's take for instance, someone's post does really well on Hacker News. I detect that in certain ways, and I cap the number of upvotes that post has on Bear underneath the surface to prevent Hacker News from affecting the rankings on Bear too much, because it's possible for like Andre Karpathy to go and write a post on Bear, and then it gets onto Hacker News and he gets 2,000 upvotes, and then he stays on the top of the Bear discovery feed for 2 weeks. Is instead what it does is it sort of caps the number of upvotes that matter, and so there's still a reasonable amount of time that is spent on the top, and then it drops off over time. And so like playing around with that algorithm has been a lot of fun.
I see. Yeah, that must be something tricky, and you always have to adjust due to, the different factors. Like, so you detect if the link comes from Hacker News, and if it does, then it does a different logic
So I don't
behind.
detect whether it comes specifically from Hacker News, but just whether there's a larger than normal a larger than normal influx of upvotes, because this tends to mean that they're coming from off-platform. So the number of people who are browsing the Bear discovery feed at any given time is fairly constant. Now, if a single post gets, 300 upvotes in the span of half an hour, I can deduce from that it's like either on Hacker News, or this person has got a very big Twitter following that they've like posted on Twitter and it's gone viral, or something like that. And in so doing, there's that sort of is hits the upvote cap and has a more natural progression through the Bear discovery feed as well.
Oh, yeah. Right, I see. And at the same time, like you said, the discovery feed gave you some tricky time too, because you have then more spammers as well who are using probably who goes, there's always a loophole, especially if you have your code, your source code on GitHub. Anyone can see the math behind of the logic, how it works, I believe.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I have to have a moderator and myself on there. I think I block about 30% of blogs that are opened on the platform, which is a lot. And the reason be it is that this isn't automated traffic. These are like backlink farms in that, if you go onto like Upwork or Fiverr and they
Mhm.
say like, oh, you can buy, you know,
Right.
10,000 backlinks for your website for $200. And then what they do is they go to every platform that they can and they say like, this plumber in Brisbane is really good backlink to that plumber's website. And so it's actual people that go and they open a blog, they post the thing, and there's no real way to determine whether they're whether they're spammers or not until the thing has been posted. What's interesting though is that like what worked super well was a basic keyword check. Um, if there's a certain uh, density of keywords, I have a feed on my admin dashboard called the dodgy feed, and it's like a dodginess score of a density of these keywords. And if it's above that, then it's a highly dodgy one, and then I can go there. I can be like, okay, block, 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 block.
Right. Yeah. 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 Multiple patterns to detect that kind of. I mean, that could be also automated, I believe, by an AI agent if you want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I actually I have the AI agent that I mentioned earlier that immediately blocks really bad stuff, and then it also is helping to categorize things that have a higher probability of being spam and just flagging them for me.
Mm, right. One last thing actually I was really interested to, like in my case, I'm a software engineer. I also like traveling, I believe, from what I've seen, you love traveling too. And are you more, would you say, do you like to work while traveling? Or I believe you traveling is traveling and just email and things like that, but nothing else. And then when you are at home, you would focus on your actual work.
Mm. So, interestingly enough, this recent trip that I did to Japan was the first time that I kind of took a vacation. Yes, I was still doing, emails and support, um, but historically, I've always been working while I was traveling. Um,
Mm,
I think going forward, I'm probably going to take vacations again. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being able to fully experience the place that I was in. Because I find that like if I'm working when I'm traveling, I don't do brilliant work, and I also don't do very engaged travel. So it's kind of like lukewarm on both fronts. And I didn't realize it until I did this last trip, and I'm like, oh wow, I can travel very intensely and have my work be in maintenance mode. And then when I get back home and I'm like invigorated and I'm relaxed, and I've also like had a lot of time to think and have some ideas that I just put onto the Trello board for later consideration. So it's like now I've got a lot of work and I have a lot of motivation to like dig my teeth into it. Um, but I also recognize that like I'm in a very unique position that, I own my own time entirely. Whereas like when I was traveling, but I was also working for a company, is I'd, work my 8 hours and then I'd enjoy the place that I was at. Um, I won't say like it's difficult to me for me to definitively say that one is better than the other, but I think for me where I am right now, I would like to travel intentionally and then work intentionally and have them be separate activities.
yeah, yeah, that's fair. Actually, I believe you really have to know yourself. And I do agree when you do work while traveling, especially when you have to do 9 hours, 8 hours a day, it's very like you are basically in front of your computer. Okay, you can in the evening, in the morning, you are elsewhere, but it's not the same. And it can also be tricky to be focused, especially if it's your own work. You would be jet lagged, you would be tired, and yeah, it's a different environment. Believe knowing
For
yourself
sure.
and especially like a BearBlog can run by itself. Um, the hosting, everything is very stable, and also when you keep it very simple and you are a team of yourself pretty much, so that makes the job also much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm really enjoying it.
That's amazing. Out of curiosity, my last question, do you have any other projects you are building at the moment, or now you are like only focusing on your BearBlog?
So I actually did start a project earlier this year, but I haven't touched it in the last 2 months. I started a sort of self-hosted open source analytics uh, tool called Bearlytics, and it's up on my GitHub. It works. I had this idea that, like, why don't we use SQLite for analytics? SQLite is a fairly good database, and because it runs in memory for the vast majority of sites, SQLite is enough to provide a great data store for analytics. So I went and I set it up. It's Django, SQLite. You can self-host it on pretty much anything that runs Linux, or even your Flies or your Herokus. And it works perfectly fine. I run it on Just Sketch Me, Just Sketch Me's website. That's how I collect the analytics information. But I haven't really touched the code in 2 months. And to be honest, I feel like open source is going through a bit of a weird time, and that's a whole other discussion to be had. But I've actually had to shut down the pull request, the ability for users to make pull requests on it,
Mm.
because I just get over inundated with pull requests from automated bots. Contrib AI is the big one that are like, hey, I've just fixed this bug and this bug and this bug and this bug. I'll like wake up in the morning and there's 20 pull requests from an
Oh,
AI agent, and I'm like, okay, close all of those. So I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit weird about open source at the moment, but that's a whole other discussion.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I do agree. Like it doesn't have as values as before because anyone can build their custom software. So publishing your code is more by transparency. What you do for BearBlog, you just show, yeah, for transparency, but it doesn't have much values anymore.
Mm.
And yeah, your analytics open source project, you don't use it for BearBlog because probably it's a bit too complex.
Yeah, like you can add it to a BearBlog, but you can add it to a BearBlog in the same way that you can add any analytics platform to a BearBlog. Um,
Mm.
you would
And,
just include like a little script in your header,
and
a
then
little
you
tracking script. Yeah,
self-host by
yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, well, that's very, very interesting. I think that will be all for today because you must also be quite tired after Japan and so much work. Yeah, but that was extremely interesting. Where can people follow you? I know you also have a podcast. Actually, you have like the idea.
The idea
Roast.
roastery.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually recorded our last episode right before this one, so I didn't even have to take my microphone off.
Oh, really?
uh,
Oh, yeah.
so the best place to find me is on my blog. It's herman.bearblog.dev. Or if you go to BearBlog and you click on View Example Blog, that'll take you to my blog as well. And on there, I keep an up-to-date list of things I'm working on, small tools that I'm tinkering with, and there's also a link to my podcast if you are interested in listening to it.
That's amazing. And yeah, indeed, like your articles are very, like, I love the way you write. And you can see it's
Thank
really
you.
you who are writing the actual articles, which is very nice to have. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much. I'm glad you enjoy them.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. Because these days you don't even know if, what you write is actually from a human. And it's nice to have an interaction to know, oh, I'm reading actually what Herman wrote before, which is
For sure.
very human interaction.
Cool.
That was really, really nice. Yeah, I wish you all of the best actually, especially for BearBlog and to last forever.
Well, thank you very much, Pierre. This has been a spectacular conversation. I think we're hitting hour and 20 minutes right now. Um, but yeah,
Time flies.
take care of yourself, and let's chat again in the future.
Definitely. My pleasure. Have a good one. Good afternoon, probably for you.
Yeah, yes.